Welcome to the SCR Connections February webinar, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this morning, Bill Icenogle. Bill is the Director for Emergency Management at Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He received his BA in Disaster and Emergency Management from the American Military University and is a retired military officer and veteran of 25 years. He is credentialed as a Louisiana Emergency Management Professional through the Louisiana Emergency Preparedness Association. Upon his retirement in 2005 from active military duty, he worked for the Governor's Office for Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness for 5 years as the Section Chief for Regional Support, working with the state's 64 parish emergency managers during a variety of disasters. In 2011, he assumes the position of the state's lead as Emergency Support Function 3 for Public Works and Engineering at Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, and he assumed his current position at Women's Hospital in January of 2017 and is responsible for emergency management, security, and safety. He has considerable experience in multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency disaster preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery applications before and during the host of both large and small disaster events. We are more than thrilled to have Bill with us this morning. Good morning, Bill.
Oh, good morning, Sarah, and thank you very much to you and Brian for helping me prepare for this. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar, and as Sarah had read off, my bio is particularly comprised of state-level emergency management, and that my focus and scope of experience is based on that. I did a lot of work prior to this so that to ensure that I didn't waste your time and what we covered here and trying to make the tether to a relationship for the National Libraries of Medicine and how they can support and effectively help prepare agencies across our states for any type of all-hazard disasters. So I'd ask Sarah that as we just roll through this, again, it may be very, very high altitude, but really kind of hit the tenets of general disaster management, the cycles, and so on, some of the things that are relevant to what we need to know and figure out where we're at, especially before an incident or disaster occurs. Some of the discussion points that we came up with was really that the disaster management cycle is foundational to anybody and everybody when we have things happen. And typically disasters happen and we prepare for them the best we can. In my experience, you can do everything you can, but unfortunately, there's always going to be something come out of the peripheral that nobody expected. But to cover each of the four elements of the disaster cycles, what we'll do, also talk about emergency declarations, because it's an all-hands evolution. We know that whenever a disaster occurs, everybody goes into a whole different form of operation, from local level to state, even federal. And to know what's going on, I think, is always a good thing. It helps you prepare and also helps mitigate the confusion that oftentimes follows disasters in regards to how do you respond and what do you need to do to mitigate whatever you're facing. Another part of the issue that we want to cover is going to be where do we fit? And I say that collectively. That's a question we often ask ourselves during the disasters. Where are we at in the cycle, disaster cycle? What do we need to be doing? And that can be prior to an event happening or even in the midst of it or during the recovery stage. Where do we fit in the whole process as a whole? So it's kind of a holistic look at disaster management and how each of the players interact. Resource acquisitions is a clear tenet of disaster management. We'll cover part of that as well in preparation for disasters. Communications, and the key one, I think, is probably 80% of any disaster, the value of networking. To start off with, I really hunted around, tried to find something that I like simple. I don't know about y'all, but I like something that easily shows me where we're at, what we do, and that type of thing. I found this slide here, I think it was on the FEMA website, and it was dealing with risk management, which is essentially, when you're talking about risk management, you're talking about disaster management in every sense of the word. But if you look at the slide, you can see the upper level above the horizontal line being protection. And in that, as we take a look at this cycle, this disaster management cycle, we see the mitigation and prevention on your far left, preparedness above, and you see the cycle continuing on to prediction and early warning, and then finally the disaster occurring. This part of the disaster management cycle is really key to the effective part of what's underneath that horizontal line, which is, the actual response phase and recovery phase of a disaster. Now, kind of going back up above that horizontal line and looking at protection, I was thinking about the national libraries and how they can actually help in that upper echelon, the upper part of that cycle. And really, what I thought of as an emergency manager is, information is key to every tenet of that protection cycle. Gathering credible information, statistics, collecting information in regards to historical events. What could I gather and what information could I have to help me prepare and even construct an emergency operations plan in preparation for any type of all hazards disaster. You'll hear me use the term all hazards only because that covers the whole boundaries of natural or man-made disasters that could affect us, as an agency on the local level, state level, even national level. And so when I use that term, it's kind of broad-based and it's pretty wide spectrum, but that's what I'm talking about. When I'm looking at mitigation and prevention and the protection side of the disaster management cycle, I'm looking at things that I've already pre-identified as a hazard or a vulnerability. And typically agencies, and that could be public or private entities, will do in the effort to prepare, they will do what's called a hazard vulnerability assessment. And what they'll figure out is basically, historically, what have we been impacted by when we're talking about all hazards, and what was the impact of them, the probability of them, and figure out and put in a categorical list of, most likely to least likely, but level of impact with both. For example, hurricanes in Louisiana, we are an accident-prone state, and as a lot of Gulf Coast states are, as y'all well know. But we know that the probability of that is actually during hurricane season, it's pretty high that we will be impacted by that. So from a mitigation standpoint, and not to make this too basic, we take in consideration for our agency in the development of that emergency operations plan, what are we going to do and how will we prepare? And what resources are we going to need to maintain resiliency in addition to operational continuity? And those are good thoughts to have. And honestly, the successful agencies that have a successful emergency management or disaster management program are ones that have already pre-considered these ideas or these hazards and have put into place, which is the mitigation piece, put into place the resources necessary to combat the effects of those events when they occur. The preparedness side of this obviously is making all preparations, and that can be along the lines of going ahead and taking those mitigation steps necessary, going ahead and acquiring the resources you believe you're going to need to maintain sustainability. But it's also in preparedness for your personnel, because personnel are part of the resources, especially when you're looking at continuity of operations. And I know that's wide varied when I speak to a very broad audience here. Depending upon where you're at, those variables, they're quite extensive. But when you're assessing your emergency management program or your emergency manager is doing so, what type of resource information do they need in regards to capturing preparedness measures? Libraries can play a key role in this in effectively researching and looking at best practices. Literally doing what we're doing now, I think, is always a good thing because we share ideas. We discuss basically some of the things we've done right and maybe even some of the things we did wrong. It's a practice for emergency managers out there at all levels as well. in the form of after-action reviews, sitting down and discussing those lessons and lessons learned. I separate those only because oftentimes in after-action reviews or when you're regrouping after recovery operations have gone full spectrum and the cycle's gone full spectrum, that you identify those lessons. And when it comes to information in that, libraries can look at, hey, how can we do better share information? How can we better promote, let's say, just training and exercises for our agency, getting involved in multi-jurisdictional exercises? How can we put out the information necessary to help prepare us for the next event that may come along down the road? The predictions in early warning that's a nicety, frankly. When you're looking at all hazards, not all hazards have the luxury of having an H hour attached to them, like a hurricane, for instance. We're at H-120, and the H hour adoption that National Weather Services used for many years is, 120 hours out prior to hurricane winds hitting your coast, or H-96, meaning 96 hours. Well, we know that oftentimes all hazards mean anything could happen at any time. And that's where this part of the disaster management cycle really needs to have a lot of emphasis placed on it. Libraries and what they can provide emergency managers, and especially the development of the emergency operations plan, is key and crucial. They need good information, quality information in the development of those plans. And that's from the perspective of an emergency manager. And looking at that, I really kind of lean toward, well, you know what, we have just a great amount of resources just at our hospital here at Women's in Baton Rouge alone. I could go down the hall to the library and find a lot of information and get a lot of assistance in helping me develop or find historical data to support the development of an emergency operations plan. In the cycle, we've now gone through the protection part of this, and I hope I'm identifying things that are worth identifying to you. But then you have your actual disaster that strikes, and typically now you're getting into the recovery part of the disaster cycle. And we had a term of play in emergency management, especially at the state level, that all emergencies are local. They start off locally, and whether that's a parish or that's a county, you have local emergency managers out there that are going to be scrambling along with first responders in response to whatever their jurisdiction's being impacted by. They have constituents, life safety, property preservation, incident stabilization are a lot of the things that they're thinking at the time. And how do they, when I'm going to use the term mitigate in this sense, I'm talking about mitigate the effects of what's happening on post-impact of that disaster. Oftentimes these local emergency managers will conduct, it's going to be preliminary damage assessments. They have to assess what's occurring out in their jurisdiction, because the next step for them is going to be reporting those damages to the state level emergency management agency. And that's critical because governors typically want to know what's happening out there in the local, at the local areas. And with that, you have the impact assessment. That's usually, we call that a windshield assessment during a disaster, but you have response that immediately goes into effect, and that is our first responders doing their job. And whether that's law enforcement, that's EMS, that's fire, that could be a number of different assets that the local emergency manager has at their disposal and local government has at their disposal to effectively try to recover, which is the next leg of the disaster management cycle. The recovery is always going to take longer than your response phase, obviously, in this cycle. And the level of impact will drive the level of resources, obviously, that are thrown at the problems or the effects of the disaster. And those resources can be multi-jurisdictional resources based on and driven by the impact and level of effect of that disaster, whether that's tornadoes, for Oklahoma, if that's flooding for Texas, as we saw in Hurricane Harvey, which was just huge. And we ourselves were impacted with some major flooding just a couple years ago, 2011. And we understand that basically there are a lot of resources that are going to get tossed at the recovery effort, and it's going to take a long time. To speak from Louisiana's standpoint, the flooding that occurred here, we are literally there's still houses being restored. So we see the effects of it daily in our own communities as we drive to work. So that'll be the final phase of recovery, which will be the reconstruction phase. So simply put, from response to the reconstruction phase, we're trying to get everything back to the way it was. I spent a lot of time on this slide only because it's foundational to everything that we do and all hands evolution to making sure it happens. The emergency declaration process is one that, I mean, we all, I think, generally know and understand, but like I said, all emergencies are going to be local. It is going to bring into play a lot of resources that typically are not activated until we see a disaster take place. And I wanted to focus a little bit just on the local level. And on this slide, and forgive me for the wordiness of it, but I wanted to offer to Brian and Sarah, anybody that would like these PowerPoint presentations afterwards, be able to have this information. A local and parish county, those declarations, that's going to place when a local emergency declaration's made at the county level or the parish level by the local government and filed at their clerk of courts, like for here in Louisiana, that puts the state emergency management agency on alert. Typically what happens is the local emergency management will use and expend whatever resources they have to combat the effects of the disaster. But oftentimes, as we've seen and can cite example after example of disasters, it goes well beyond the local government's ability to be able to effectively respond to that disaster, so they have to ask for help from the state. This is an official declaration that takes place, and it will impact everybody in every agency, every private and public entity that's out there within that local jurisdiction, because everyone will be scrambling for resources, and oftentimes, depending upon the type of disaster, you may find yourself trying to reach for resources that everyone else is reaching for as well, and that could be at the local level all the way to the state and federal level. But the local emergency management authorities are responsible, and they're in place to actually go ahead and activate their own emergency operation plan and effectively take steps to mitigate what's going on within their parish or county. Like I said, if the disaster that spins out of control and it's getting bigger than the local parish or county, the state level, the governor and the emergency management authority, they will basically make an assessment of all parishes that are declaring or all counties that are declaring, and that will drive them to make the determination of whether or not they need to make a federal declaration. And we've seen that happen. And that is basically, we're taking this kind of multi-jurisdictionally from local, state, now to federal. That's the driving factor to basically, do we send meaning the governor and the state level emergency manager, do we send a flare-up, if you will, pardon my analogy, but it's the one I always think of, to let the federal government know, FEMA, we are now in a major disaster state, and we are, expending all resources to try to handle it ourselves. But we have X number of counties that have declared. This is the level of damage that we are seeing across the spectrum of each county or parish, and these are the resources that we are expending to try to mitigate the effects of the disaster. When the state declaration goes out, federal resources are prepared for deployment to the declaring state. I think many of you remember the BP oil spill. Well, it was an anomaly in a lot of ways, because it was literally a federal disaster from the get-go, because it was happening out in the Gulf of Mexico. It had not yet reached the shores of Gulf states, but it was going to. And so you saw each of those states automatically declare. A declaration is not meaning that, you know, we've already had impact by, but it is a notification to the federal government we are going to require federal resources. So it's good to know when we're talking about where we fit in the whole big picture from a holistic view. So the state level government, the last bullet there, that is a presidential approved declaration that is supported by what's known as preliminary damage assessment data that's done at each of the local levels and provided to the governor so that he can submit it to the president and let them know in his letter what the level of damage is across the state. Okay, what comes with that is often it's going to be not only federal resources coming down, which require advanced notification so that they can prepare, you know, federal resources to come down and assist states, but it'll also help prepare for assisting constituents out in each of these parishes or counties across the state with individual assistance, which is funding, to help them get back on their feet, or public assistance, again, which is funding through federal funding program that comes during the recovery stage. So state health care facilities or private entities, that can literally determine the level of outside support that you receive during an actual disaster. And that's important because your local local and state emergency management offices, they're going to be sensitive to healthcare operations occurring. Gathering information, having information at the ready assists the local emergency management authorities with being able to provide information, even historic information. With the recovery part or phase of the disaster management cycle, libraries can play a key role in that in gathering statistical data, having information readily on hand, or already starting to pull information to support the local emergency management authority with providing additional and correct quality information to the governor so that they can capture a presidential declaration. Funding from the federal government, oftentimes when it does come, it comes like with the public assistance funding that comes with the recovery portion of a disaster. If awarded, is a 75-25 split between federal government and the state. So federal government typically would pay up to 75% reimbursement, and the state would pay the additional 25. That is negotiable, and when you get to the recovery phase, if it is deemed a major disaster, that sometimes the president may award 100% federal assistance to states. Just one of those by-the-by bits of information. So where do we fit holistically? We've got 5 states that are on this call right now, and we all do things differently. We all face different threats. When we do our hazard vulnerability assessments, there may be threats that are just indigenous to our environments. Oklahoma has a rash of, I know, tornadoes, inclement weather as well, and we do as well, but in the form of hurricanes and flooding and that. You know, Texas, you can get anything, you know, but every state has its own statutes that drive the disaster management response, and statutes are important because it gives the legal authority to respond during a disaster. I put on the slide what ours are here within the state. We have the Disaster Act, which is one, and Louisiana Revised Statute, which provides that definition structure and empowers state and local governments when preparing for, preventing, responding to, or recovering from those natural or man-made disasters. I've listed some. I did a little bit of research and looked at each of our brothers and sisters out there in Texas and New Mexico and Arkansas and Oklahoma, and these were some of the ones I found, but I'm sure there's more. And some of them are specifically tailored statutes that help drive, you know, those authorities and empowers the government to do what they need to do during a disaster. So from the federal response side, the federal statute is the Robert T. Stafford Disaster and Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, which that applies to every state that is on this call. And what this act does, it constitutes the statutory authority for most federal disaster response activities, especially as it pertains to FEMA and FEMA programs. if it's gotten to this level of a disaster where the federal government's involved and FEMA is starting to deploy teams down to the states, or they're already resident and they're starting the recovery process, they will function basically. They're sent to, they arrive at the state's request, and they go into the full operations for recovery to help that state get back on their feet. And we can cite many examples of this over time. I know I can, since being involved in emergency management. The other question that comes up oftentimes, and depending upon the disaster that happens, is going to be resource acquisition. Now, key to this, and especially in regards to pulling information and that to support emergency management, libraries can provide information in regards to resource availability and that typically comes from what are your threats. Those are pre-identified, like we talked about in the preparedness cycle part of disaster management, and that's typically done by entities either at the local level or even at the agency level, that could be private or public, by hazard vulnerability assessments that we discussed earlier. That's foundational. You want the resources you're going to need to have, and so where do we get those? And what historically has been available? And those are all things that emergency managers think about, and or agencies, public or private, should be thinking about prior to the disaster, any all hazards disaster taking place. So the options, I just put some down here just real quickly, just from an emergency management perspective. They can purchase and store these resources once identified locally, or local emergency contract or retainer contract can be approved or drafted ahead of time. Examples of this is if you're prone to flooding in a particular area, you may have a local emergency manager or even an agency purchase water barriers ahead of time, or have a contract for them as a mitigation step or process in preparation for a flooding event occurring. That you have an inventory, and that becomes part of your response phase whenever that, let's say, flooding should threaten that area. Other things that help out is mutual aid and cooperative endeavor agreements with like agencies. Typically, like agencies, you may have a hospital or another facility out there that would be that's threatened by the same type of disaster, but they use the same resources, may have an overabundance of them. Cooperative endeavor agreements are basically an agreement that if we're affected and you're not, hey, we'll assist you. Same thing with mutual aid. They're really almost a handshake formally in documentation between agencies, between municipalities. It can be between counties, or in bigger phase, they have actually state-to-state mutual aid agreements that are signed and agreed to between governors. In response to, hey, if you're impacted with this type of disaster, we have these resources and we'll come to your aid, and vice versa if the opposite should occur. And I've seen this happen. Those EMAC requests, which are mutual aid or compacts or handshakes between states to support one another. Parish, county, or state, federal emergency management resource availability. That's also going to come into play depending upon the level of declaration that's been approved. And I think I've kind of maybe rode the hair off of that, but that's essentially that's what emergency management is thinking about. Libraries, like I said, they play a critical role in being able to research ahead of time, provide information, training, exercise, be involved in all that, and the collaboration and the coordination between entities. That could be agencies, that could be jurisdictions or municipalities, working with local first responders or other emergency managers ahead of time before the impact of a disaster that's unforeseen happens. The saying we had in emergency management is the last place you want to exchange business cards is during a disaster. That's a big proponent or a push for networking ahead of time. If I was to ask you who are you more likely to help, somebody that you've sat down with and met and discussed maybe the sharing of information during a disaster, best practices, both the best practices and maybe some of the things to look out for. You're more apt to talk to somebody that you have met with, sat down with at a table, and worked with ahead of time by somebody that picks up the phone and says, hey, I need your help, and you've never met them before. So that's a good practice in regards to, acquiring resources and basically putting that into your program for responding to any type of incident. Another question you have to ask yourself, is what's the contingency plans if disaster resources can't be acquired? And that takes place, and oftentimes it takes place, especially if there's a particular type of resource that everyone is clamoring for or that you do not have enough of. What type of information can you provide? Can the library provide a local emergency manager in regards to, hey, where you can acquire, what are some of the options? What have other states or other agencies used in similar type disasters that effectively have helped them during these type of this type of disaster, whatever it may be. There are some programs out there, and I talked to Brian about this, Brian Leaf, and they have a new program. The National Library of Medicine has a funding availability program specifically for emergency preparedness. And this is really good, and we wanted to put this into the brief because disaster preparedness and emergency management and that is not new to hospitals, but the emphasis being placed on the greater concentration and I would say allocation of resources and is becoming more and more prominent. Typically, environmental care facilities always met the response and preparation and response for disasters, but now everybody's realizing, hey, we all have to almost be on the same sheet of music here, and hospitals are effectively, and I say that effectively, getting involved with integrating in with local emergency managers, their local first responders, and and actually being a part of the bigger picture, the jurisdictional bigger picture in the local arena or regionally, working together with anybody and everybody to be involved during a disaster. This is a great practice. It's a fantastic practice, especially joint exercises where you have everybody that would be actively involved in that type of disaster are players at a tabletop exercise or whatever. But the description of this award, Brian had sent me the information on, and there's the website there, is to enable organizations, as it says, to address all phases of disaster management, including the ones that we covered in the disaster cycle, like that I talked about ad nauseum. And the aid of information resources available from the NNLM, in regards to being able to provide information to support those phases of that cycle of disaster management. I went ahead and listed, when I looked up this award, I listed the goals because I thought they were really, really good. It just seemed like a real effective practice to provide funding for this type of preparation. And you can see everything that's listed here is really toward the preparation or preparedness side of the disaster management cycle. Evidence-based practices, I use the term best practices, forgive me, but that's really the same thing. What really works during a disaster or this type of disaster, integrating and promoting disaster-related resources, services, tools, and the National Library of Medicine specialized information services into the educational programs or continuity plans. A lot of agencies will have continuity of operational plans. If they do not have one in particular set aside that's titled that will be embedded in their emergency operations plans, the phases of continuity operations. We talked about that at the beginning. We said resiliency and maintaining continuity of operations is critical. Well, it is for all of us, We want to be ready. We want to have a good response, and we want to be prepared whenever something happens. But libraries can provide enhanced disaster preparedness through the education, programming, partnerships, like we said, for networking. You know, that's effectively done, and whenever it's done, it's never time lost. It's, you know, it's literally an investment in the preparation side of a potential disaster happening down the road. And, you know, you see the rest of the bullets here, and I'm not going to read them ad nauseum, but I think the funding of this program is really effective from a goals perspective. One of the things I mentioned earlier also is about the FEMA Public Assistance Program, and that's actual funding that is available to local and state entities whenever a disaster hits and you're in the recovery side. And I wanted to put some information in here regarding that because we have agencies out there when you're in the recovery portion of a disaster, do you even qualify for that funding? It's a great question to ask your local emergency manager, and I would say one of the evidence-based practices or best practices that we're talking about here and knowing this information is if a disaster strikes and there is a presidential declaration that's approved and FEMA does respond to the disaster and you are in the recovery mode, at that point in time, they're starting this program, the Public Assistance Program, and there are agencies, there are industry, state jurisdictions that basically have the ability to acquire resources or funding back from the federal government to help them get back on their feet and restore operations. So I thought that was a key point to put out there. There are federal programs that are out there for funding even prior to a disaster taking place, and I would encourage anybody to go to the FEMA website and look at some of those programs. You would be probably working with your local emergency manager and discussing that, but get to know them. Go over and talk to them. And let them know what you can provide as well and supporting them. It is a collaborative effort whenever a disaster happens. It is all hands on deck, to pardon the expression, but we're all impacted, our families, the agencies we work at. The level of information, you know, the collaborative effort and how that takes place, you know, after a disaster strikes is critical and crucial. And I'm stating the obvious, many of you know that, but which brings me and leads into the next point, the communication side of, you know, we've got a network ahead of time, and effectively there's going to be two types of communications that go on during a disaster, and you can be involved in that. Whether that's internal communications, that can be along the lines of notifications as well. That's interdepartmental. How are you supporting your own staff with that resiliency and operational continuity? What information can you be providing them? You know, from a library standpoint, if we've already done a hazard vulnerability assessment and we know what we're threatened by, do I already have at their disposal information I can provide them to better assist them with their response to the hazard as it unfolds or in the recovery part or phase of the disaster. And I put some of the internal communications down that we ourselves, you know, from a hospital standpoint, look at and use. You know, that's internal notifications because we know it's not just us alone. We have to you know, we have our employees working at our facilities and agencies that we have to consider because continuity of operations absolutely dependent upon that. The thing that's often lost in the, I guess, the chaos and confusion that occurs during a disaster is we're asking employees to have a loyalty to work at their facility when this goes down, but these individuals also have families. You know, and, you know, what are we doing to help prepare them for any of these types of disasters if we need them here? And how many of those individuals from a staff perspective are considered essential to operations, and some of them may not be essential? Another consideration to take that your emergency management department should be looking at. How do we basically converse and talk back and forth in regards to what phase of the disaster we're in, What are we doing to mitigate the effects of the disaster? How are we getting that information out to, one, decision makers within our own agencies and to our employees? That's all important information, and that's internal communications and notifications. The external communications is one that's key, because how are you going to communicate with other agencies that you may have already networked with appropriately, already made preparations, even exercised with them and trained with them? How are you going to communicate with them when infrastructure goes down? Is there do you have continuity for operations? And communications is a clear piece of that. If you can't communicate, you cannot coordinate. And so what are we doing to help one another out and basically put in place a layered approach or a tiered approach to primary, secondary communications? You know, the what-if game is always a good game to play when we're talking about disasters. How are we putting information out, you know, to the public in regards to our agencies? And what information can the library provide, the public information for putting that message out? That's a critical piece. We call it crisis communication in the field of emergency management, but if you're dealing with the general public, that message is crucial. I think everybody could recognize or remember Katrina. You know, if you stop and think about that, can anybody tell me one good story that you saw in the local news about what was occurring down in New Orleans or the surrounding parishes with Katrina? Very few, right? I can't think of one. But it was one of the worst disasters that happened, but we all know that there was good things that did occur. You know, some people did some brave things. Some, you know, first responding agencies did some fantastic stuff. And a lot of lessons learned came out of that. But how did we communicate that out? It probably wasn't effectively done, truthfully speaking. But it can be on a micro level when we're talking about how our own agency responds to an emergency. You know, how are we going to handle those communications out to the public? And how can the libraries assist in the research or gathering information to help them in performance of that function? Communication capability with first responder agencies, utility providers. Do we have contact information for them in our communications plan? Local, state emergency management office, cell numbers, radio networks, so on and so forth. I think you all get the gist of that. So the power of networking, I think I've hit this and several times during this briefing, but you know, local, state, emergency management office, you know, knowing ahead of time what the resources are, what their actions or reactions going to be, what's in their emergency operations plan, let alone ours, and what support would a local and state emergency management officer provide for any particular type of disaster. If we really were impacted by flooding last time, if that should happen again, you know, sitting down with the local emergency management office and saying, hey, is there a way we can find a mitigation practice or principle here to help out? Is there information we can share or help you gather to support, you know, effectively responding to that disaster when it occurs? You know, the power of networking with first responder agencies, we deal with them all the time. You know, whether it's fire, that could be hazmat, hazardous materials, EMS, medevac carriers. You know, there's so many of them out there, but have we talked to them and actually, you know, exercised with them, trained with them, and have, I call it expectations management. We have a genuine expectation of what we can expect from when a disaster does occur, a level of support, and what expectations they have of us in regards to providing information or data to them in regards to assisting with that disaster response or recovery. And we talked about continuity of operations plan. Basically, that's for resiliency and making sure we've already pre-identified an alternate site location that may be a part of that plan. Levels of succession, in other words, if the CEO cannot make it in, who's next in charge? And it's already pre-identified and put in a plan. It's already agreed to by everybody, and it's been trained and exercised. So that's all part of the mitigation process. I kind of went through it really quick, and hopefully I didn't take too much time, but I think I'm on track, Sarah. But with that, I just want to offer to everybody, one, thank you very much for taking time out to sit and listen to this, but I told Sarah and Brian I'd freely give my contact information here. Here's my email address. If you got additional questions or that, post our webinar here, please feel free to contact me, and I'll forward you my phone number if you want to talk at greater lengths on any tenet of emergency management. So, Sarah, with that, I'll just turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Bill, for a wonderful presentation. We do want to give time for everyone. If they have any questions they'd like to ask now, you go ahead and put those in the chat box. We've already gotten a few, Bill, that I'll go ahead and ask to you. The first question is about that NNLM disaster grant. It's a $15,000 award. And if you were awarded this money, Bill, how might you begin to spend that, given the number of approaches to preparedness you've talked about today? Where might it come into play when trying to partner with first responders or other agencies?
Well, and I think that's a fantastic question. And one of the things I'd be looking at, and that's why I put the goals on there, Sarah, because I thought there were very realistic goals that were listed for the use of that funding. And it is going to be relative to how and what the agency is preparing for. It may be very well prepared for flooding or something like that, but they may see a vulnerability in their ability to be able to respond, let's say, to hurricanes or tornadoes. Using that funding to basically use that toward the targeted vulnerability, I would say, is going to be critical. And it will involve basically libraries, the libraries at agencies and that getting together with local, not only just local emergency management professionals or first responders, but their own emergency management department, finding out what's in their emergency operations plan. And what do they have? It all tethers, all this weaves a fine blanket of what do you already have and what do you need to prepare for. So effectively using that funding towards some of the goals listed there, it's going to be relative to the agency. So, you know, with me, if it was Baton Rouge Women's Hospital here, I would be looking at using that funding for training for staff and personnel, because we have a healthcare staff here and their primary focus is it's healthcare. Well, you know what, I can use that funding to basically put on, to use it for training, emergency management type training or exercises that would involve that staff, that would help prepare us and bolster our resiliency as an agency in the effort to make sure we are better prepared. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think that's a great response. Thank you for that, Bill. We do have another question in the chat box talking about in the past when there was height of anthrax scare, there was some critical information that was kept at hospitals and libraries to respond to different scenarios. Now in the current atmosphere and environment with the potential, however likely or unlikely, of a nuclear threat, are there any similar tools that should be in place right now, such as print or hard copies of materials or core or essential materials that should be on site in the case of that kind of disaster?
That's another exceptional question. And frankly, I think the CDC is an excellent well to draw from in regards to that type of information. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, when you're talking about like nuclear or radiation type environments, they've got a very informative website that provides some very credible information regarding emergency preparedness in response to a radiation exposure. Examples would be like types of radiation emergencies, the use of potassium iodide, which is known as KI. It's a term used at the advice of the public health official, you know, for the state, depending on the environment. And also, knowing your resources is another very good thing to know. I know here in the state of Louisiana, we have the 62nd Battalion, which was with the National Guard, and they deal specifically with we call CBRNE, CBRNE, which is chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosives. That should be addressed in the agency's EOP, their Emergency Operations Plan, and have you even talked to them? You know, every state's different, understand, but for gathering information or pulling information to have at the ready CDC would be a great website to go to look at some of that, because they handle a very wide spectrum of emergency management and medical type emergencies that may impact, agencies or jurisdictions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer, Bill. So we'll give a couple more minutes. If anyone wants to write a question in the chat box, please feel free to do that right now. As Bill mentioned, he has shared his contact information there on the screen if anyone wants to follow up directly with him. And of course, you're also free to contact our office as well, and we are certainly able to pass those questions along to Bill also. So it looks like we don't have any more questions at this time. Again, if you have them later, please feel free to send them along. So I am going to go ahead and stop the recording. I do ask that everyone stay logged on just for a few more minutes as we do just a few final housekeeping items. So let me get that recording stopped.